Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session on year-end procedures for 2019. My name is Jeanette, and I'll be your guide this morning for the next hour and a half to 2 hours as we cover the majority of the applications as far as year-end is concerned. Let's see. Let's talk about our agenda here. We're going to talk a little bit about getting ready for year-end, just some, high-level office things that you need to be aware of. And then we're going to jump in and talk about some of the applications. We're going to review each one, and then on some of these, I will jump into the software and demonstrate what you need to run. The order that we're going to do this in, we're going to go ahead and start with accounts payable, and then go through the other applications, and we're going to end with general ledger and then payroll lastly. So those of you that don't have the payroll module, you'll be able to you'll have the choice to hang with us through payroll, or you can go ahead and leave the meeting. Okay. All right, the first thing I want to talk about are backups. Year-end is a pretty important place to make sure that you have a good backup of your Sage data folders, that you actually maybe test whatever software you're using to create those backups. It's pretty painful to talk to users who think they have a backup, but they haven't actually tested their medium, and they have to go back to that backup, and they find out that maybe their software has failed to do their backups, or whatever they're backing up to has failed. So make sure that every once in a while you're verifying that your backups are actually working. You might want to think about preserving an off-site copy of your data just in case something happens to your office. It doesn't do you any good if you have a backup, but it was in the same building that maybe burnt, or for whatever reason had a problem. A lot of times the reason you're going to a backup is because something has happened to the data and you need to restore and maybe eliminate having to rekey your data. So if you don't have that backup and something happens, you're having to redo part of your day's work. And one thing to remember is because of the interface between all the modules, even if you lose something in let's say payroll, or you lose it in accounts payable, those modules affect the other data files on your system. So you may not just be restoring one set of files. It might be a full data folder. Now, what we're going to talk about today is making selective backups prior to closing the year in each module, so that you don't have to go back to your backup software to pull information back over, or have to repeat anything that may have been done during the day. Because you might put off your year-end processing until everyone has gone home for the day. You're going to want to make a backup before you close those data files, just in case. So we'll be talking about that, and I'll be demonstrating the file tools option that you have inside Sage to be able to do that easily. The year-end software. We're only going to be receiving one version of a year-end update, and that's for version 18, and it will actually be called version 18.4. That will be a full version of the software, not including the taxes. Taxes are done in a separate download. So you need to be watching for communication from Sage. They will let you know when 18.4 is available for download. They'll also let you know when taxes are available, the tax changes for 2020. Now, I don't have a release date for version 18.4. Typically, the year-end release comes out mid-December. So we should start looking for that communication after the first week in December. closure dates for both Sage and OnPoint for year end. So Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and New Year's Day for both Sage and OnPoint. So you need to make a note of that, that you won't be able to get a hold of anybody as far as support is concerned on those days. One of the other things that you should be keeping in mind right now is the paper that you're going to need for your year-end processing for both W-2s and for 1099s. It's the same as it was last year. Using the Atrix software, you're going to be able to print out to plain paper all the copies of all the forms. If you want to use the perforated paper, you'll need to purchase that prior to doing your final run. You can run samples on just plain paper, and then when you're ready to do the real deal, and if you're going to be the one sending the forms out to the employees or the vendors, you need the perforated blank paper, 4 up. And what I mean by 4 up is 4-part. So you've got 4 forms on a single sheet. So I've got a paper requirement here. This first screen is for the W-2s, and the next screen is for the 1099s. Same thing, blank paper to run your tests, perforated paper if you're going to be printing the hard copies that you're sending out to the vendors. If you are letting Atrix do the mailing or the emailing of the forms, then you won't need to purchase any of the 4-part paper. Now, if you need to know how much paper to order, if you're going to be the one that actually prints the forms to send out, there are 2 reports, one in payroll. There is under reports, tax preparation, there's a W-2 count report that will show you how many W-2 forms you need. And for 1099s, inside accounts payable. Under reports, miscellaneous 1099 preparation. So you can, during the month of December, if you wanted to, start getting ready for year end, this is one of the things that you might take a look at to see how much paper you're going to need to purchase in order to be ready. All right, that brings us up to the first module that we're going to talk about today, accounts payable. So again, get your paper ordered for your 1099 forms, and then actually December and January is where you need to be getting prepared for your year end. One of the things I have listed here is to verify your year end dates in AP settings. Remember that AP is on a yearly basis. It's not, you're not closing AP month to month, you're closing it once a year. And because we have a next year bucket on the master file, sometimes people will forget and they'll leave their AP master file in the prior year all year long. And you need to make sure that those dates are valid so that when you get to 2020, if you haven't run your 1099 forms yet, you can start to enter for 2020, and those amounts will go into the next year bucket. Now let me I'm going to jump into AP, and I want to show you here under File, Company Settings, AP Settings. These 2 dates are what you need to verify before you do anything for 2020 or before you run your 1099s for 2019. You need to make sure that you've got a year-ending date that's valid, actually in both places. So let me show you here on the vendor why that's important. On the 1099 Settings tab, down at the bottom, you've got a this year, last year, and next year bucket. So if my master file is sitting in 2019, I can leave it there. If this is the amount that I need to print on my 1099, I can leave the year end alone until after I run my 1099s, because it will see that 2019 is the current year and it will pull the amount from the this year field. If I need to start entering and printing checks for 2020 in the month of January before I run my 1099s, those amounts are going to update into the next year bucket. When I am ready to close the year, the process will be for the system to take this year, move it into last year. This number will go away. Whatever is in the next year bucket will move back over to this year. So it kind of does a little shift here between these buckets. If you look at your master file and it's still sitting back at 2018, this year is 2018. Next year is 2019, which is what you want to run your your 1099 on. Anything that you enter in for 2020, I think, is going to also pop into this next year bucket. So that's why it's very important that you verify those dates in AP settings and make sure that you are sitting in 2019 at this point. Now, if you're not, then you're going to run, if you're still sitting in 2018, you're going to run tasks, close 1099 year. That's the step that rolls the figures around. Now, 1099 year takes care of the 1099 tab. Close year takes care of the totals tab on the vendor. And typically, close year corresponds to your fiscal year end. And so the tab that's going to move around is your totals tab. So here's the same set of columns. This year, last year, next year. These things shift around. This year goes into last year. Next year rolls over into this year. Now, if you decide, once you have everything entered in to the system for 2019, you're not ready to run the 1099s yet, and you want to go ahead and get everything rolled into 2020, you can. The Atrix software will let you run your 1099 forms on the last year fields. So you can still get your forms to print if 2019 is sitting in the last year bucket. Okay. Now, as far as the forms are concerned, we are going to hold a separate class for Atrix, and I'll review this setup here again with you when we do that class. That class is going to be on December 10th, where we actually demonstrate the 1099 and W-2 forms. But in the meantime, to get ready for the 1099s, you can use, again, on the 1099 settings button or tab, just make sure that everybody that's supposed to get a form has a check mark here, and that you verified that your tax ID numbers are valid. If they're doing business as a different name, make sure they have a name in here, and then make sure the form type is marked correctly. I'm going to review this again when we do our Atrix class on the 10th. But this is something that you can work on now if you're not sure if everybody has been set up correctly. The other thing that you can work on is printing up the preparation report. You can run that report in AP under reports. And this again is going to show you who's receiving a form, and it will show you the year-to-date totals that it's going to print. And you can also do test runs of your 1099s. And again, we're going to demonstrate that in our Atrix class next month. Now, each application that we're going to talk about today, we will have some file maintenance that you should be thinking about as part of your year-end process. Because some of these applications are very data intense, and AP is one of those, you should be thinking about moving your checks at some point to history. The AP vendor master file is not only a master file, but it's also a transaction file. Every time you enter an invoice, it writes a record to that AP master file. Every time you write a check, it writes a check record. The invoices also have distribution records. So again, every time you enter an invoice, you not only add an invoice, but you add a distribution record. And the same with the checks. You've got payment records, payment distribution records, potentially tax records that are also part of those transactions that get written into that master file. So this file, as you go day to day, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. If you have never moved, if you've been on the system for a while and you have never moved information to history, you're probably seeing that your reports are running slower and slower. Doing the move and moving the checks, which also moves the invoices out, and then removing any vendors that you're not using, and then compacting your current files will make your reports run faster. This is going to be true. We're going to talk about this again when we get to accounts receivable and when we get to job cost. Because again, those modules are transaction heavy. And then lastly, again, the two close year programs. These are fairly simple. I'm going to show you the two screenshots for this. I'm also going to show you how to do the backup. I'm going to demonstrate this in using accounts payable as our example, but this will be basically the same in each application. So let me jump back into accounts payable here. Okay, so prior to running either of these two steps, close year or close 1099 year, you're going to come in here under Tools, and you're going to, first, we're going to do a backup, and this is done under File Tools. Leave the bullet at backup and hit Next. And then, because we're being very specific about the tasks that we're going to run, we're only going to back up our AP files. We don't need to do a full data folder backup. You won't be able to do the move or the close year with people in the software. So you're going to do this when everybody is out of Sage. Could be during a lunch hour, could be after everyone has gone for the day. Again, you're going to do the backup. You're going to pick, let me cancel this again. You're going to use Add Files because you're going to do these one at a time. So the first file I'm going to grab is my master APM file. Then I'm going to grab my current, and let me put this in name order. I'm going to grab my current.apt file. And I'm going to add files again. I'm going to grab my history. I don't have a history file here for AP, so I'm okay there. And let's see. I think just these two, because these two files are the ones that will be affected by the move and by the close year. All right, so I'm going to say next to this, I'm going to put my backup file out on my desktop. So we want to put this file somewhere where it's going to be easy for you to find. If something goes wrong during the close year, then you can quickly find this backup file and restore it. So I'm going to call this 2019 AP backup. And then just hit the next button at the bottom. It does a verification to make sure that everything's good. All green lights means that you are good to go. Anything in red, you need to investigate that. Typically, what you might see is that you've got a file in use. Either somebody is still in accounts payable, or they've left for the day and they haven't closed out of whatever they were running. So you need to make sure that all the files are open. It won't let you back up a file that is locked open by another task. Okay? And then you'll just next all the way through. Okay? And then finish. Okay? At this point, then, you're ready to close the year. So you'll run tasks, close 1099 year, and it's showing you here what's going to happen. Your current year, it was 19. Your new year is 2020. And this is what it should look like. If you're closing the fiscal year, same thing. Very simple screen. Shows you the current year. Here's what the new fiscal year is going to be. Should be 2020. Once that's done, then I would come over here to Tools and use Move, Payments, and I would go Current to History. Now, because I didn't have a history file, it's telling me that it's going to create one. And it's actually going to create two history files for me. Again, because AP is a little bit different and the master file is actually a transaction file, the information coming out of the master file is going to go into a history.api file. The information coming out of the current file is going to go into a history.apt file. So when this is done, you will have two history files. On this next window, it asks you for the cutoff date. Now, I would probably leave I don't know, maybe a year and a half in the current file. It depends on how far back common reports need to go. So I would probably change this. This is pre-filled with the systems date. So I might say move, let's see, this is the sample data, so it's pretty old. So I'm going to say my cutoff date is 12/31/14. Anything up to and including that date is going to be moved. And then you hit the Start button, and I would watch your background task so that you can see when it was completed. Now, depending again on how many years of information you have in your files, this might take a while, especially when we get into job cost and maybe AR. If you've got years and years worth, watch this background task to make sure that it says % complete 100 and that the status is completed normally. Once the move is done, come in under Tools and go to File Doctor. You can say, yes, you have a current backup. And then here you're going to select your AP Master and your AP Current file. Those are the two files that it moved information out of. The reason we're doing this using the File Doctor is so that we can check the box for compact good files. This is going to compress those two files, freeing up all the space that those moved records held. So just moving the information doesn't make the file any smaller, and it won't make the reports run any faster because it's still, as you run your reports, it's going through and reading every block of information, whether there's something in there or not, in that file. So running this step here is what's going to compress and make the files smaller so that they reports run faster. Okay, so master and current. Now, in your year-end guide, we sent a handout that was attached to the meeting invite. You have a year-end procedures guide for last year. Sage has not released the 2019 guide, so you have the 18. We sent it out just in case you didn't get it from last year, or you don't, it may have been thrown away, or you don't remember where you put it. The AP that we were just talking about now, this is on page 16. It's chapter 3 in the year-end guide, and it talks about getting ready for year-end. It talks about closing the year, closing the fiscal year, maintaining your files, which is what we just walked through, is on page 20. Now, there are questions at the bottom of page 20 about new year stuff and prior year stuff. So even though you have closed the year, someone may come in at the last minute before you're ready to run your 1099s, and you've closed the year, and they've got one more invoice that needs to go in, one more payment that they forgot to record. You can put a prior date on that information on either a manual check or invoice, and it will let you post to the last year buckets. So that is not a problem. All right, property management is on page 21. Just very briefly, there's not a year-end task for property management. You just need to make sure everything has been entered for the year. That you have a backup of your data. You're going to run close month. So property management is kind of like general ledger and job costs, where it does have a close month routine. In job costs, the close month takes the place of close year, so it's the same in property management. And then your forms for property management, your interest and your mortgage interest, you would again run those through the Atrix software. Okay, the other applications we're going to talk about, this starts in Chapter 5 on page 24. We're going to talk about first accounts receivable. So again, we want to make sure that everything has been posted for the year. All your year-end stuff is done, your reconciliations. You've backed up your data, and then you are going to run tasks close year. This is accounts receivable is similar to AP in the fact that there's no close month routine in AP and AR other than reconciling the application back to general ledger. But it does have a close year routine. So let me jump into accounts receivable here. We also have a date that we need to verify. So again, if you look under File, Company Settings, AR Settings, you need to make sure that this year-end date is the current year. It should be sitting at 2019. So that when you close the month, it's going to roll. Now, what it rolls, if we look at a customer, bring somebody up here. Okay. If you look at the tabs on the customer, you'll notice that there are no dollar amount tabs here. The dollar amounts are down at the bottom under the Totals button. And if you click there, you'll see the first tab is your aging balances. So you've got a year-to-date and a next year bucket. So that's what I mean by making sure that your date is sitting at 2019. We don't have a last year bucket. So when you run the close year, it's going to take whatever is in year-to-date, and that drops off. And it takes whatever is in the next year bucket and it rolls it over to year-to-date. Okay. So that's on the Balances tab. We don't have any other balances that are going to be affected by the close year. It's just this tab right here under Balances. So again, you're going to verify your date. You're going to make your backup again using Tools, File Tools. And let's do another one here real quick. Accounts Receivable has a couple more file types that you need to be aware of. We're going to add the master file, master.arm. We're going to add activity.ara. We're going to add current.art. That's not the right one. Current.art. So these three, and then because there's also a move, I would actually grab, if you have a history file, we don't have a history.art file yet, so we don't need to worry about that. So these three for sure, master, ARA, and current ART. And then again, I would just put this out somewhere that you can quickly find it. Okay. Make sure you have all green lights. And then just next all the way through. Okay. Then at this point, you can go ahead and run the close year program. And again, very simple screen. It's showing you what the current year is and what your new year-end date is going to be. It should come up as 2020. Okay. And then your move command for archiving is current to history again. And it's going to create the history file for me. It's asking me to make sure that I've posted everything before I continue. And then I can give it a date range of what to move. So again, you probably want to leave at least a year out there for reporting purposes. Now this is only going to move fully paid invoices. If the invoice has any amount left open on it, retainage, or they've only made partial payments and there's still an outstanding amount, it will not move those transactions. If you've recorded any miscellaneous GL or job cost cash receipts, that's what this checkbox does, move unassociated entries. So those will get moved out to history. And then after you're done with the move, you want to, again, do File Doctor. And this time you want to select your AR activity file and your current file, those two. That's where the information is being moved from. And then check the box to compact good files. Okay. All right, cash management. There is a close year task in cash management. I'm going to show you here what it actually moves. All right, so again, you want to make sure that any adjustments that need to be recorded for 2019 have been entered through Edit Register, that you've posted. Any outstanding checks from AP or payroll, you've done any outstanding deposits that are not in yet. We're going to take a look here in a second about the date in cash management setting. And then I'm going to show you what the closure task actually does in cash management. All right, so first let's go into cash management here. And let's take a look at where the date is. Okay, so it's in CM settings on the General tab, and there's a year-ending date here. Make sure that this is set at 2019. Now, what it's actually going to move, if you take a look at your bank account, if you have entered any interest income, that's going to show up here on the interest totals tab. Year to date, next year, last year. And the close year program rolls these buckets. Year to date goes to last year, next year rolls up into year to date. This is the only screen that close year in cash management affects. Now, to get information into these fields, you have to have recorded in Edit Register you have to have recorded I think it's a deposit here. Let me get over to here. All right. And you have to change this type right here where it says type does not apply. Wait a minute. Maybe that's not. Hold on. Let me try adjustment. Let's see if that pulls it in. There it is. Okay, so take that back. It's not a deposit. It's an adjustment, addition, and what you're picking here is this monthly interest type. It has to be one of the types that say interest on it, and I think that's the only one. Oh, nope, there's overnight interest. So it's got to be one of these that say interest. Oop. Oh. Hold on. Let me get down to the... Actually, let's just stick it in other income here. Let me find it. We'll stick it in there. Oh, okay. Let me change this date here. It's the sample data. It is, let me see if I can do it for there. I need to change this date. No. I need to change this date. Yes. Okay. Yes. Post. Let's make sure everything completed normally. Okay, so let's take a look now at the bank account. At interest. You didn't post. Where'd you go? Hold on. Yeah, that should have updated in there. Maybe because of the date. Hold on. All right, let's change this to be make it the year-end date. Okay, now let's make a post. I think sometimes when you're testing the stuff in the sample data, it gets it confused. For some reason, Sage keeps their data back at 2015, which doesn't help when you're in 2019. Okay. It still didn't update. Well, okay, I'm not going to play around with that, but what should happen is that the interest income will populate on the interest tab, and then The close year is what actually moves that money around. Now, the other thing you want to also take advantage of is moving old information out of your register file to history. If you pull up Edit Register and you look in there and you have years and years worth of checks, deposits, withdrawals, adjustments, you're having to sift through that again when you run all your reports. So you need to go ahead and use Move Entries, Register to History, and you need to tell it when to start and when to end. So I would probably leave maybe a year's worth of stuff there and then move the rest out to history. And all of these moves are just moving the transactions from one file to another. It doesn't mean that you can never report on those transactions again. You still have the capability of running inquiries and reports off the history files in any of these applications. What we're trying to do here is to streamline your current data so that, again, your reports and your processing will run a lot faster. Now, once you have the move done, again, you're going to come into Tools and you're going to go to File, Doctor, and you're going to compact your register file. Now, of course, both of these things, the close year and the move, you're going to make a backup before you run those two steps. All right, contracts. Contracts and equipment and job costs. These three kind of lump together because they are, again, they are the same. And you should be, they are the same steps as far as year end is concerned because they're the same steps that you run for close month. Contracts, equipment, and job costs do not have a close year. You just keep running close month forever. Okay. So, but when you are at the end of the year, you want to make sure, again, everything is posted, you've made a backup, and then you close the month. Okay. Now, contracts does have an option to move completed contracts to history. So let's jump in here real quick and take a look at what we're talking about here. Now, again, contracts has a date, so make sure that even though we don't have a close year program, make sure that this date is the end of the year. Because when we move this, in this example, when I move December, when I close the December, it's going to change this year-end date for me to 12/20/20. And this should actually be right because if you're using contracts and you're closing job cost and contracts on a monthly basis, I would just verify it, but this should already be set correctly. Now, the backup is the file names in contracts are a little bit different. So I'm going to demonstrate file tools again here because these have different file names. So I'm going to use Add Files again. And the files in contracts are called active, and there are 3 of them. So you want the CNA, the CNC, and the CNT. Okay, those 3. That makes up all the information about your contracts within the data file. There's no master. The transactions are stored here in these 3 files. So as long as you have these 3, you have a good backup. And again, I would put this out where you can find it. Okay. Name it. Again, I'm naming this consistently so I know it's a year-end backup for each application. And then just next all the way through, and it's made your backup. Okay. Now, if you want to move contracts out of your existing files, you'll need to come in and open the contract, and you need to change this status bar to closed so that you can move closed contracts out and compact. And again, if you're looking at a list of contracts here, when you go in to open a contract and you've got lists and lists of stuff that has been in here for years that you don't need to see anymore, you're not reporting on these contracts anymore, they're completely done, go ahead and get them marked as being closed, and then use Tools, Move Closed Contracts, and go Current to History. Now, the nice thing about equipment and job cost is if you move something to history, we also have the capability of moving it back. And we can do this in AR as well. So contracts, job cost, AR has the ability to come back. So if you make a mistake, or if someone asks you to move something and they now realize that needs to come back in and be in the current set of reports, they've got more transactions to enter against that contract or against that job, you can move it back. You don't have to go to a backup. Just use the move option and come back the other direction. Okay. Then once you've done the move, again, use File Doctor, and you're going to grab these 3 files. This gets all 3 of the files that we just made a backup of. Okay. Equipment. Again, same set of processes that you do for contracts and job costs. Make sure everything is posted, print your month-end reports, make a backup of your data, close the month. So again, if we take a look, now equipment is a little bit different because if we take a look in EQ settings, we don't have a date field. We just have, we have a month-end date down here at the bottom. This month-ending date should correspond to your general ledger. So we really don't have anything that we need to change here in EQ settings. This should all be correct, and it's actually will be keeping pace with job costs because you should include it as part of your month-end processing that you do with the other applications. So the tasks here, you just have the close month. There's no close year. So again, you want to make a backup before you close the month again, and then use your Tools, Move Transactions, and here we can go Current to History. Now notice on this one we don't have a history back to current. So make sure you have a good backup before you do the move. What we're moving here are just the transactions, the posted transactions in equipment. And again, if you've never done it and you've been on the system for years, you want to go ahead and run this step. And I would use a condition button here on this one. It doesn't have any prompts on this window. So use the condition button and grab the accounting date and say maybe the accounting date is less than or equal to December of last year. Leave a year's worth of stuff in here. And then again, you'll do Tools, File Doctor, and you're going to compact the equipment current file. Now, job cost is our next one. Again, this is still on page 26. You're still doing the same month-end procedures that you always do. You're making sure everything is posted. You're printing all your month-end reports. You're reconciling back to general ledger. You've made a backup of your data. You close the month. You need to be sure that you are verifying the closed month print file, that everything is in balance. Okay? And then as far as the move options are concerned, we have two ways to do this. You can leave your jobs in the main data folder and just move current to history. Or if you need to get the closed jobs out as well, I'm going to walk through a little demonstration here of creating a closed job folder, and you've got a handout in your book, or excuse me, a handout that came with the GoToMeeting that walks you through doing this. And the whole point of having this completed job folder is so that your closed jobs and the transactions that go with those closed jobs are together in one place. Because remember, you can only have one master file for job cost inside your current data folder. If you move jobs and you don't move to a completed jobs folder, but then you move current to history within the current folder, you don't have those two things together. The job cost master file records are in a separate place because you can't have more than one job cost master file in the current folder. Now, some people might move jobs and maybe they create a new file for each year. And then they move current to history, and that's happening in the main data folder. But the jobs themselves, they have to search for them because if you create a brand new master file every year and you don't know when that job was actually closed, depending on what it is you need to report on, you're going to have to search for that job in multiple data folders. It can be kind of confusing because the other thing that moving a job without using a completed jobs folder is that data folder that you create does not show up when you go into File, Open Company. It's not on the list because when that folder is created, it doesn't create the control file that Sage needs to recognize it as a Sage data folder. So this is why I'm going to demonstrate this to you, and I'm going to really highly recommend that you do this. And you can clean up. I mean, if you've got jobs all over the place, we can get control files into those folders so that we're able to access them and then get everything moved together so that you can run reports on these jobs. If someone comes to you 6 months later and says, I need a job cost report on this job and it was closed, 2 years ago. Well, you moved it out to the completed jobs folder. All you have to do is go into that folder and run the report. All the transactions are there. All the job master file information is there. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over now to job cost. And the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new company. And I've got instructions starting on page 1 in your handout for the completed jobs folder. And I'm actually going to call this completed jobs. I'm going to call it actually Sage completed jobs. And when I enter out of the top, it fills in with a data folder path name. In the description, I'm going to call this closed jobs. So I see that when I look at my company list. Use current setup, leave it checkmarked. I want it to copy over some things out of the sample data company. I'm going to click OK. And then it's created the folder for me. See up here at the top, I'm in the Sage completed jobs folder. Now, what I want to do here is I'm going to go to Open Company, and I want to get the path name. Let me pull this up here for Timberline Construction. So this is sitting under Program Data, Sage, Timberline Office, Data, Construction, Sample Data. I need to know this path because when I come in here under Company Settings, File Locations, I'm going to put that on some of my file types here. And I've got a list of these for you on page 2. And the reason that we need to put this path name in is so that when you run these reports or you do these inquiries, it's going to look back at your main data folder for some of these other records that it needs that have been built into the reports and the inquiries in the system. If we don't do this, you won't be able to run any of those inquiries or reports unless you recreate all of these or copy over all of these files. So the easiest way is just to go ahead and put them in here, put the full path name in. Let's see. All right, now the nice thing that we can do here, because I don't want to have to type that on every single line, is I'm just going to highlight this line and I'm going to do a Control-C for copy. And then I'm going to go down the line here and I'm going to put that with a Control-V for paste, and I'm going to put it on each of these lines that I need this to be on so that I can run these reports. Now, I'm not putting any transactions. All I'm grabbing here are the master file records that I'm going to need to run these reports. So I'm going to get down here. I might need cash management. I need the contract file. I need the equipment. And the, oop, I know. The standard file. Yep, we know that. I need the GL file. I need the, yeah. Payroll. Don't mark anything in job cost because this is our completed jobs folder. We don't want it to go anywhere else for job cost information. So let me come down and get the payroll master system and tax file here. Okay. And maybe I might need the tax, depending on if you do sales tax, you might need that one too. Okay. So once you have that locked in, then you're going to come back over to your main data folder. So let me switch back over. Let me grab this down. Grab Timberline Construction. And I'm going to come back in under Setup Jobs. And I'm going to make sure that the jobs that I want to move have a status of closed. So let me grab these 2 jobs. Okay. Oop, that's not what I meant to do. Did I close out a job cost? I did. Nope. There it is. Okay. All right, so now I can use Tools, Move, and I'm going to do Transactions, and I'm going to go Current to Current. Current to Current means I'm going to take information out of the current file in my current data folder, and I'm going to send it to another current file in a different folder. So when you get this window, watch what it says up at the top. It wants a destination file folder. So I need to use the drop down, come back up here to data, and I'm going to grab my Sage completed jobs folder. And down below, I'm going to leave the destination file as current. The first time I do this, I'm going to get this prompt that the file was not found. Okay to create. I'm going to say yes. Before you hit start, you have to come in here with conditions, and you have to say on the JC job that the status, find it here, is equal to closed. Okay, and this is on page 4. Okay, I'm going to say okay, and okay again, and now I'm going to hit start. Now this is moving the transactions. So let's make sure this is done. It's complete. So now I'm going to come back to Tools, Move, and I'm going to move the jobs. Again, it's asking me at the top for a destination. So I want to use the drop down, come back up to Data, grab the Completed Jobs folder. It's going to say Master here at the bottom. I'm going to click Open and get the prompt that says it's not there. Do you want to create it? And I'm going to say yes. And then again, I need to make sure I hit the conditions. Don't hit start right away. Hit the conditions, come down to the status field, equal to closed. And then if you want to move commitments at the same time, just put a check mark in the box. And then start. And we'll watch the background. And it's done. All right, now I can look at Setup Jobs. And if I do a list, those top 2 jobs, it didn't take it only took the second one. Why didn't it take this one? Oh, maybe I didn't save it. Darn it. My status. Nope, I didn't save it. So, and that's good. So it left it, but it took out job number 2. 002 is gone. And if I look at transactions, if I go to Inquiry and I go to Entries, All, and I take a look in the current file, and I do a condition that the job is 03002. Oh, come on. 03002. There are no transactions. Now, if I switch companies and I come in over to the Completed Jobs folder, and I go in under Setup, Jobs, and I do a list, there's the closed job. If I go to, close this out of here, Inquiry, Entries, All Entries on the current file, there's all my transactions for just this one job. And the reason that I'm able to get this far into the transactions is because of those file locations that I set up at the very beginning. So at this point, I can switch into this closed job folder. All my closed jobs are together along with all of their transactions. Now, if you need to return that job back to the main folder, all you have to do is come into the Sage Completed Jobs folder and go the other way. Do Tools, Move, Jobs, or Transactions. And this time, your destination is going to be your main data folder. So you're going back the other way. So you'll move the job and its transactions back, and then you're able to, post more information to it, include it on your job cost reports. And then when it's done again, move it back. Now, what's also important, let's get back into the sample data here, is after you do this move, make sure that you come in here and run Tools, File Doctor, and Compact. And compact both your master file and your current file. Now, depending on how big your files are, depending on how many jobs that you do during the year, how many of those jobs had to be moved over to a completed jobs folder, how many are left in the main data folder, this step right here could take a long time. So this might be something that you schedule for an evening when everybody is off the system so that it can run a little bit faster. The benefit of this is all of your job cost reports will run so much faster because they're not having to sift through transactions and jobs that you no longer need on those reports. So this is something that I highly recommend that you do, that you don't try to move current to history in your main data folder, and that you don't try creating new job cost master files every year for those completed jobs, because that is so much harder to retrieve and to run reports off if you do it that way. The setup on this can be, a little confusing at the beginning, but once you have it done and you continue to use this folder to move your jobs, life will be so much easier, and people will be able to find all the information on all the projects in one spot, either in the current folder or all of it together in the completed folder. Right. Residential management, I don't know anything about this program, but just, if you are running it, make sure that you've got everything posted, that you print your month-end reports, you back up, and then there's an end-of-month routine that you need to run. Okay. Service management, you just keep going. Post everything, make sure everything's posted for the year, print your month-end reports. So very simple. Okay. All right, so we're ready to talk about general ledger. You want to make sure that you've got everything updated for 2019. You want to make sure that you have corrected any rejected entries. So what we're talking about here is verifying that everything that's in your new.glt file that needs to be posted is posted. Okay. You want to make sure that all your suspense accounts have a zero balance. And you should know that if your financial statements are set up to ignore suspense accounts, your statements should be out of balance each month. So you should be checking that actually all during the year at month end. You're going to print all your month end reports, again verifying that everything is in balance, the trial balance, the ledgers, all the financial statements. You'll run your reconciliations between GL and the other modules. So GL and job cost, GL and AP, GL and AR, GL and cash management. Print financial statements, and then again, make a backup of your data. Okay. Now the difference here, this is just a preparation part. I've repeated this again as far as the final year end. Print a final year-to-date ledger, and again, making sure everything has been done, closing the year, moving current to history, and then compacting your files. So let's take a look here in General Ledger. Okay. Now, there isn't actually a date that we look at in settings like there is in the other modules. What we're looking for here is that in the open close year, that you're at the end of the year. So open close posting period, this is going to show you what month you're in. So here we're at the end of the year. Close all these periods here. We're on a calendar year, and 2015 is our current period. So we're going to roll into 2016. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to run a financial statement here. And I want to take a look at my net income or loss. So I'm going to OK this, and I'm going to run this on an individual statement. And I'm going to do a print preview here so that we can see. Here's for Timberline Construction. And if I scroll down here to net income, this is the number that I need to see when I close my year. Let me write that down. 17993.20. So that's the amount that I'm going to be closing to retained earnings when I run close year. So before I do this, though, again, I'm going to run Tools, File Tools. And I'm going to make a backup. I'm going to add files here. And I'm going to grab my GeoMaster, my current. And if I have a history file, I do have a history GLT, so I'm going to grab it as well. These files are affected by closing the year. Not so much the current file, but it's a good idea to pick that one up as well. What's going to happen in this master file is fields are going to roll. I'm going to show you after we run this. And everything, all your income and expense and cost accounts that are closed with this close year, the entries that it writes to retained earnings are stored in the history.glt file. So let me go ahead and put this again. I'm putting everything out on my desktop so I can find it. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, to run the close year, I'm going to come down to close fiscal year. I can say, yep, I'm not lying. I've made a backup. I'm going to select this first company. I'm going to click OK. And I'm seeing here that this number matches what I saw on my balance sheet for net income or loss. Now, if this number is not the same, there are two things to verify. Number one, if you've added any new accounts during the year, have you added those accounts to your financial statement design? If you haven't, they're not being picked up when it runs the statement, and so that number won't include this balance. The other thing you need to make sure is when you set up any new accounts, the default is for the account to be an asset. If you don't switch it to be an income, a cost, or expense account, when you run the close year, it will not be including that account. So you need to go through your chart of accounts, check the base accounts first if you're using suffixes, make the change to the base account if you find one, and then come in and look at the full account. Because the full account, even if you change the base account, the full account will still be marked as an asset when it needs to be marked as one of these other three types. After you make those changes, then come in and run close fiscal year again. And 99 out of 100 times that fixes this. Okay. It's either the statement doesn't have the account number in it, or the account has an incorrect type on it. Now, once this balances, you'll accept it. It's going to pop up with a screen to show you the current calendar for the current year and then what the future calendar looks like. Click OK, and then start. We'll watch for it to be completed. Now, what's happened is if I go back in here to open close posting period, this has now rolled to January of 2016. If I take a look at that prefix, that company, it's changed the fiscal year ending date here to the next year. When it rolled through and made those changes at the same time, it rolled we'll look at an asset account. Okay, on the asset accounts, it rolled your activity from December to January. If there was anything in the January future bucket, it added that to current and future balance, and it zeroed out net change. Actually, it moved year-to-date net change down to year-to-date net change 1 year ago. It also took this current balance and it populated it here in this year end 1 year ago, and it rolled what was in there down to 2 years. Okay. And it will keep doing that every time you close your year up to 10 years. And then after 10, this number drops off. On the activity bucket, it moved everything down. So this 12/31/2015 was up here at the top center. It moved January over, and then it added a new future balance here at the top of the fields on the left-hand side. So these are your 6 months into the future. And then every time you close month from now on, it's rolling whatever's here at the bottom, rolls up here to the top middle. Now, if you're looking at an income or expense account, okay, the difference here is that it zeroes out your current balance. Okay, income and expense and cost accounts, the current balance is just for the year. On a balance sheet account, current balance is for the life of that account. It never zeroes those buckets out. But the rest of the buckets act exactly the same. So year-to-date net change would be in here. It would roll down to year-to-date net change 1 year ago. All the fields on the activity tab roll. Okay. Now, because of all these things that are happening in this GL master file, if something happens during the close year and it aborts, or the power goes out, and it didn't have a chance to finish, you cannot recover from that. You have to go to backup and restore your files and run the close year again. There is no way for you to come in and say, okay, roll the rest of these buckets down. It won't do it. Okay? And even restarting the close year over again will not help it. You probably will get corrupt data messages if that happens. So that's why, especially for general ledger, making this quick backup prior to running the close year, if something bad happens, I can restore that quickly and then run my close year over again. So on this screen, this is just a recap of what's happening when you close the year. Again, entries that are closing those income, expense, and cost accounts are being created in the history file. So whatever transaction it's creating to retained earnings writes to history. And then on the income and expense accounts, again, it's clearing out the current balance because it's posting that to retained earnings. And then it's advancing all the year-end balances by 1 year. It advances the dates on your prefixes by 1 month. It advances all the account activity fields by 1 month. And then anything that had been posted into the future, if that future period becomes current, it's adding that amount to the current balance on the Balance tab. Okay. Now, what happens if you have prior year adjustments? So my recommendation to you is that you close the year in the same time frame that you close your month. Even though you can hold your general ledger open, you can go 6 months into the future. Unfortunately, for reporting purposes, you can't run future financial statements. So the only report that you could get if you leave it open is a year-to-date ledger. You can use the year-to-date ledger and do a date range. You can't run the trial balance, the canned trial balance reports, and you can't run your your current financial statements. So my recommendation to you is that you run the close year in the same time frame that you run a close month. So you're keeping current with your months. You're still able to run ledgers, trial balances, financial statements for the months going into the current year. And then once you get your final entries from your accountant, you can come back in, of course, make a backup of your data, and then open close posting period. You can open that prior month, probably December if you're on a calendar year, December of the prior year, and then use record entries to make the journal entry, post those entries. I would recommend another backup again at that time. And this is the step that most people forget. You need to run close fiscal year again to close those prior year adjustments to retained earnings. And then you can reprint financial statements but using the rollback, and you can reprint your year-to-date ledgers using again a date range. And then lastly, go back in and use open close posting period and close that period. All right, so let's demonstrate that. And I'll show you what happens if you skip a step. All right, so let's say the accountant got us the stuff pretty fast, but we'd already closed the year. So I'm going to come in here. And this didn't actually, what you should see is this. You should see your open period at the top on the left. Everything else should be marked as closed. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to open this period up here. I'm going to make a prior year adjustment. And then I'm going to come into tasks and I'm going to do record entries. And I'm going to use that accounting date. And let's see, I'm going to grab parts. Maybe we had some parts. Okay, and it warns me because of my GL settings that I'm doing a prior year. And so I'm going to we'll just call this prior adjustment. And I'm going to affect, let's see, I think I have some inventory expense account in here. Let me find it. We'll just stick it under supplies and tools there. Yep. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and finish this. Start. And I'm going to post. Watch, make sure it's done. Okay. So now I can go ahead and I can run a financial statement. I can roll it back if I need to. And I can pick what I'm looking for. And I'm reprinting. Notice the date here. It's reprinting for December. so I can roll it back. Okay. Now, what happens if I haven't closed the year again? So if I run a trial balance here, and actually let me cancel that. I just want to do this on company 10. And I run my trial balance, and oh, what's this? I'm out of balance. I just ran it before those entries, and it was in balance. Now I'm out of balance. Whenever you are running the reports and you see this out of balance number on one of these canned reports, the first thing you need to look for is prior year adjustments. So if I were to see this, I would say, okay, maybe somebody made a prior year adjustment and it hasn't been posted to retained earnings yet. So you would come back in here under tasks and run close fiscal year. You're going to be warned that you're not at year end. The system will not let you physically close a year unless you're in that last month of the year. But it will let you close prior period adjustments. So notice that second sentence. We've got some prior period adjustments there. So if I say okay, it's pulled in the amount that I entered to supplies. Okay. So now I can accept that. It's not actually physically changing the dates. What it's doing is it's closing that amount to retained earnings only. So if I come back in under setup and I look at my company record, I'm still in January and my year is still 2016. If I look at my reports now, let me do a trial balance. I'm back in balance. And now I want to come back over here to open close posting period, and I'm going to reclose that period. Okay. So again, you don't need to hold your general ledger open until you get your closing entries from your accountant. Go ahead and close it just like normal so that you can keep running reports, all of the canned reports and the financials. Because we can roll back on the financial statements and we can use a date modification on the year-to-date ledger, you can reprint those final reports and replace the ones that you had previously printed. Okay. Now, in your book on page 31 is a checklist for making prior year adjustments. And it walks through the same steps, and it tells you about running the close year again. Okay. All right, so now the last application that we're ready to take a look at is payroll, which this will be back at the beginning of your year-to-date or your year-end processing guide, starting on page 10. Okay. So December tasks, what you're going to want to make sure that you do is if you are printing the copies for the employees, make sure that you have your paper. Try to round up all of the adjusting entries or corrections that you need to make for 2019, and then process and post your final payroll for the year. You also want to take a look at the W-2 formats. Atrix does use the W-2 format setup out of Sage to define the boxes that are going to print on the form itself. Then in January, prior to running your W-2s, you want to make sure all of your reports have been run. You want to make sure that you've reconciled payroll. You've backed up all of your files. And then one of the things you want to decide is when you want to run your W-2s. You can, because I'm sure most of you are going to have a payroll that's due the first week of January, and you're probably not going to be ready to run W-2s the first week of January. You can run W-2s on a prior year. So you don't have to make a copy or run the W-2s, January 1. You can decide that you're going to run your W-2s after you've closed the year. You have that choice when you run the W-2 step. The only thing that you need to be aware of is if you are pulling things like 401ks, anything that needs to fill into box 12 or box 14, you need to have formulas set up for those amounts so that it pulls the last year fields from the master file. If you have it set to use the current year fields on the W-2 form that's set up inside Sage, then the numbers are not going to come out right. So you need to make the decision, one, when am I going to run the W-2s? And if I, if I decide to do it after I close the year, do I have the correct formulas created, and are those set up on the W-2 form setup screen inside Payroll? All right, so before you run your W-2s, you want to make sure you have your year-end release installed. That'll be 18.4. You want to do a test run. You can run W-2s and 1099s in a test mode as many times as you need to until you're ready to print the final forms. And you're going to do that through the task drop-down using the Atrix option. They print the complete laser form for you. And then you can also, if you choose, you can e-file through Atrix as well for federal and state W-2 forms. When you're ready to close the year, you want to make sure that anything that needs to be carried over into the new year, that you've got it marked to retain totals at close year. And I'll show you that one once we get into the software. And then you can close your year. Now, I would recommend that you download the tax file, the 2019 tax file, as soon as you get the notice. You can download it, but not update it until you're ready to run the first payroll for 2020. It'll warn you every time you go into payroll after you download the file that, hey, you've got a file sitting out here that needs to be updated, and it'll ask you, do you want to do it now? And you can say no until you're ready. And then you need to run tools update taxes before you run that first payroll of 2019. You also need to make sure that after you update, actually either before or after, that you go in and make any changes to any unemployment percentages or limits. Okay. So let's jump in to payroll here and take a look at a few things. All right. Because payroll is live, I'm just going to show you where the dates are here inside settings, but these should be current. You should be sitting in December at the end of the year with a year-end date of 2019. When we close the year, this is going to roll to 2020, and the month is going to roll to January. Under Setup, Pays, Deductions, and Fringes, the checkbox we were talking about is this one right here, retain year-to-date totals at close year. The examples I can give you for this is if you are accruing things like sick or vacation or PTO and you want those amounts to roll over into the next year so that you can use formulas on them to help with limits that you have on those accruals, you need to keep the year-to-date amount in those items. So pays, it would be accrual type pays that you might be retaining. Deductions, it might be an advance where you've got the employee may have borrowed money, you've got an automatic deduction set up to take so much out of every check, and they may have borrowed it towards the end of the year so they haven't paid everything back. You don't want to zero that year-to-date amount out because it will just keep going. You want to, because you've got a limit set up on it, you may need this to retain that year-to-date total at close year. Fringes, I can't think of anything where you would want to keep hold of that. I think pays and deductions are the most common ones. And again, pays would be accruals, deductions would be loan repayments. Okay. If you do a test run of your W-2s and you find that the amounts are incorrect, one of the things that we have we might ask you is, do you have any deductions that are exempt, like a 401k? Did you forget to mark the exempt checkboxes? And you may have. So we'll have you come in and mark those boxes, and then we'll have you run under tax preparation. We'll have you run. Oh, I'm sorry. Under tools, we'll have you run recalculate subject to rebuild those buckets. And then you should be running under tax preparation these subject to reports, employee and employer. Okay. Right. Right. Just quickly, so that you can be getting this ready, we'll cover this again in the Atrix class next month. But under Modify Forms, this is where your W-2 form is. And you really only need one. You don't have to create a new one for every year. Okay. I would make sure that you put a penny in here for the minimum. You don't need to print W-2s for somebody who didn't work during the year. So minimum of a penny. And then under amounts, this is where you will define what needs to print in boxes 12, all of these, and then if you need anything in the boxes 14. Now again, if you decide that you are going to run your W-2s after you close the year, this particular form would not be right because it's pulling the deduction for the 401k, and this would pull the current year. I would need to create a formula, and I don't think we have one there. And I'll do this next month when we do our Atrix class. I would need a formula here that would go out and grab prior year 401k. All right, so when you are ready to close the year, again, do tools, do file tools, and you're going to back up your master file, your master PRM, and I would go ahead at the same time, grab your current file and your history file. Add files. If you have a history.prt file in there, which I don't have yet, okay, I don't need that. So again, grab your master and your current file, and Again, let's put this out where I can easily grab it. Okay. And then I'm ready to run tasks, close year. And again, simple screen. It doesn't show you what your dates were and what they're going to be because payroll is current. So it's going to roll from 2019 to 2020. Okay. Now, in the back of your manual here, there are some pages that I want to point out for you. And actually, let me get to. May not have printed those pages out. Hold on a second. The steps for backing up and a list of all the files. Page 81 here. Hold on. I don't think I printed those out for myself, but if you take a look at starting on page 81, there's an Appendix A, and it shows you the files for each application. And then Appendix B has some more archive procedures in it. So your year-end guide will have, excuse me, all the sections that you need that will show you what the files are recommended for backing up. All right. Well, we're done just a little bit early this afternoon. Just some reminders. You will be getting communications from Sage for the year-end release and for the tax release and for the year-end guide. So at the same time, I'm pretty sure at the same time they release the year-end guide, the guide will be included in that as well. There's only going to be one supported version for year-end this year, and that's 18.4. The guide, there'll be a link. It's online. And actually, we sent that to you, so you had it for the class. But if you lose that, if you go into the help topics, there is a documents area, and the year-end guide is listed there. I haven't heard if Sage is going to send out weekly tips and common questions again this year. They have done it in the years past. I hope they do it again. So be on the lookout for those. You also have access to live chat. So you know that the year end is kind of a busy time of year. Sometimes the wait times to get through to support are pretty long. You have that option, of course, to go through support. You can do live chat. Let me show you where that is. Here under help, it's right here, live chat. And that will connect you with someone that you can message back and forth. If you have a simple question, that might be the fastest way to get an answer. Of course, you always have the option to let OnPoint know, and Tina can or Lori can let me know that they can send the question to me, and then I'm very happy to help you out with that. Here's where the guides will be once they update. If you take a look here under the drop down, you'll see under year end, these will be the updated year-end guides, and that you'll see the communication about when that has been updated. Okay. And then again, our closure dates are December 24th, 25th, and January 1. So I want to thank you for joining us today. If there's anyone else in your company that wasn't able to participate today, we are repeating this class again on December 7th. And then our Atrix session is on December 10th. And I'm sorry, the repeat of this is on December 17th. Okay. And then Atrix is on December 10. All right, so we have a few minutes left. If you have any questions on anything that we covered today, please type those in the chat area, and Tina can let me know if anything has anything come in so far. Tina, any questions?
There doesn't look like there's any questions, Jeanette.
Okay, we'll give them a minute if anybody wants to ask a question, they can.
There doesn't seem to be any questions.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody again for joining us today. And I hope to see you on December 10th for our Atrix session.